bringing you our third 2024 presentation in cosmic science. We have been experiencing some technical difficulties here, so although this is the 5th day of January, I cannot upload this immediately, and so this lecture, as well as the prior two, will be uploaded at a future date. Currently, we're also experiencing some recording difficulties, so I apologize for the spare format here, but I trust that that won't interfere with our learning process. Today, we're going to have a bit of a diversion from the sequence. This is the right time for such a diversion for several reasons, partially because there are so many interruptions, but at the end of 2023 was a somewhat logical end as we began to enter hyperspheric space. But there is no such thing as hyperspheric space in science yet. There is hyperspace, and that is used to compute spherical space, certainly in the Einstein field equation it is. But there is no actual geometry of the sphere. There is the geometry of the line, which has been extended to a linear system going to 2, 3, and 4 dimensions. There are cases recently in the desperation of physics to somehow break the logjam in physics. A 10-dimensional space has been absolutely seriously put forward, and a man named, I believe it's Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, a very, very popular and famous interviewee. He doesn't really have a direct connection with the industry, but he is a scholar, and he has attracted a great deal of attention in the recent interview conducted by Brian Keating, where not only Eric Weinstein was on, but also the highly respected Dr. I believe it's Rossi, forgive me, but this can be looked up, and Sabine, or actually I should say Sabina Hassenfelder. Those three were all on the same program together to talk about the problems in quantum mechanics and their opinions on how to solve those problems. That's what we're doing also. But Eric had a most amazing point of view. He was the most cogent of the three, although, I'm sorry, it's Dr. Rosselli, and I've forgotten his first name, but, well, whatever the case, he was, of course, the best. He answered best. But Brian Keating is an extremely good interviewer, and he is an advanced interviewer, probably the most advanced interviewer I have seen thus far, far surpassing Lex Friedman, who has a very laid-back and somewhat helpless approach. He's simply trying to get views. Brian Keating, of course, they're all trying to get views, so that's somewhat unfair. But Brian wants to prod. Lex does not. Lex wants to soothe. And Eric has been on, that is, Eric Weinstein has been on the Lex Friedman show several times, and has talked down to Lex, and Lex accepts that. So Eric has his own interview program too, where he had on Sir Roger Penrose. So Eric is no slouch. I don't mean to ever put down these men for what they're doing, because what they're doing in context of what they want. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. I have to take a certain, I guess you'd say, point of view, because I'm trying to do science. And a scientist is required to be brutal, absolutely brutal, when it comes to the progress of science. And progress in science can be measured in several ways, but as far as getting understanding and getting truth, that's where I draw the line. And if a presenter or someone who's being interviewed is not furthering science by promoting truth, is not promoting understanding, but is doing something to divert the attention from understanding, it is simply the nature of science. It's not my nature to argue or put down anybody. But it is the nature of science to do that, and science is absolutely ruthless that way. There is no room for opinion, and there really is no room for mistakes. Now, when it comes to theory, the field has been wide open for a century for anybody to say virtually anything that they want. So there's the bracketing information for what you and I are after. We want to solve these paradoxes. Science is about solutions, nothing less than that. Theories are placeholders that mean failure. If you have a theory about something, it means you don't know. That is unacceptable. We have to know. That is the imperative of science for a man who's trying to do what a man is supposed to try to do, according to the blueprint under which we operate, which is rational logic. Rational logic is not emotional. It's not meant to be cruel, but it is cruel if you happen to be emotionally oriented. Now, we all are 99% emotionally oriented, but not scientists, not when we're doing science. Then we don't argue. Although, of course, we do, but we shouldn't. So this is not meant to contradict or harm anybody in any way. This, theoretically, in any event, is what we all want, is, in fact, what I'm doing. Now, we all say we're doing it. So what's the point? Here's the point. We'd like to talk today about some very simple things. And I'll name the 5 things that we're going to talk about today in order to approach cutting-edge science. The absolute bow shock edge of science right now is in space-time and quantum mechanics. Everyone who's listening to me could undoubtedly make a list of unanswered questions, both in cosmology and in astronomy and in subatomic particle physics, and you could probably name several more. We intend to get those answers. That is what science does under my jurisdiction. I represent what I just told you. We want understanding, and we want the truth. We don't serve any industry. If a man is serving the industry, as Lex and Eric, of course, are, Sabina is, Dr. Rosselli is, they're all serving the industry. They're making money. That's not what science is for. You could say so and you could make a case for it, and then you are not under my jurisdiction. You're on your own. You're with the world. It really comes to that. So the 5 things. Thing is a very abstract word, but it's very useful if you don't have a better word. The 5 things we want to talk about, 2 of them are numbers, and 3 of them are objects in geometry. So we're talking about mathematics and geometry, and not advanced geometry, and not advanced mathematics. Go to the other end of the spectrum. What is the simplest of all topics in geometry? I'm going to present 3 topics that are at the basis of geometry. The straight line, the circle, and the sphere. And in mathematics, what are the 2 topics that I've selected? The number 1 and the number 2. And from these 3 things, we're going to build up to the present-day, modern, cutting edge of science with some revelatory added information called value-added information. So let's begin the way the Greeks began, the way you and I began in school. Everybody in the world who gets into science begins with geometry and mathematics. It's a matter of choice which one comes first. Geometry would be correct. But nature has taught us that these go together and they alternate. And you'll see that being drawn out in this very brief and lighthearted 3rd lecture of 2024 in our series on hyperspheric space, which I just was able to barely broach in late 2023. It is brand new. There is no such thing as hyperspheric space in consensual science. It's unknown. Nobody would know what you're talking about anywhere in the world unless you can find somebody. But I can assure you, it's my job to make sure that these things are either known or unknown. Hyperspheric space is completely unknown. What we have instead is a pseudo, you could say pseudo-spherical, but it's actually pseudo-hyperbolic space is used for space-time. And remarkably enough, and this has been pointed out recently in interviews with very, very good people, making the comment that I fully agree with, quantum mechanics remains a paradox, actually a paradox system, because it has no geometry. There is no geometry in quantum mechanics, none. That is the paradox. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to hyperspheric space once we have a firm grasp on the value of spherical space and how it relates to the geometry that we actually do use in science right now and the number system we use. So let's begin with where the Greeks began, with the straight line. The straight line, as it is conceived in its geometric sense, is an open-ended line, which means that it goes to two infinities. It can be shown that since these infinities are equivalent, that the line can be said to have a center when it's drawn in free space. We're not going to go into a great deal of detail, which I've already gone into in 2023, so you can accept everything I say without proof. You're going to have to trust me. There is no way around it. But I went to great pains, over 400 lectures, to prove that I'm trustworthy, because I had to make sure of all this. So what I just said is true. The straight line goes to two infinities, and it is balanced on what I call the Archimedean balance point. And for the line, it is a point. And just to jump ahead, you know now that that has a number, because the line is numbers. The line and linear numbers are exactly the same thing. That was proved by John Horton Conway in my lifetime, a man who just recently died of the COVID virus about 3 years ago, one of the greatest logicians, one of the greatest mathematicians who's ever lived. And he should have probably gotten a Nobel Prize for his discovery of the definition of the linear number, since all of science is based on it. But I'll carry forward his work and make sure that his name is remembered the way it should be, not for the game of life. A ridiculous pastime, in his opinion. I fully agree. But it's amazing with polymaths. He was the last of the polymaths. And even their gaming, even the way they play games, is instructive to the rest of mankind. And he was something else. It's nothing compared with his discovery of the linear numbers. The definition. So, I've capitalized on all that information to reapproach the line. So now you know three aspects of the line. There are two infinities and a center. It can be proved retroactively, once we get to the circle and sphere, that those two infinities are one infinity. And therefore, it's safe to say, it's actually correct to say, that is the integral infinity of the line, is the combination of those 2 points. Those 2 points are one infinity. And that should start to raise a red flag in your mind. If it's one infinity, how come the line intersects infinity at 2 points? Doesn't that create a problem? Yes, it does. It creates an enormous problem, that there's a plus and minus infinity. Because in order to get the infinitesimal, you have to use the operator for that object, which is the line, and the operator for that object is add. Not what you and I were taught in school. We were taught 4 operators. That's wrong. The line only has one operator, add. And therefore the two infinities, since they're polar opposites, add to 0. And that's the infinitesimal of the line, and that's correct. I'm a genius, so you can accept that. You won't accept it unless you have the proof. But I just told you, I've already given you the proof. So if you don't know the proof, that's your fault. That's why I said I'm a genius. It's to challenge you. Nobody likes to hear someone call themselves a genius. I don't wince, though. Because you're either going to understand this the way I present it, or you're going to be left behind. So this is the truth. The actual substance of mathematics begins with the realization that 0 is an artificial number. It only works with add on the line. And that's simply insufficient for physics. That was not known until the 20th century. So I hope that gives you a bit of at least comfort in the rather shocking news that I got all this, but nobody else has. Only I know this. So let's go on. That's the line. And that's the pseudo number 0 and the pseudo infinity of the line, which causes all of our problems in physics at the cutting edge, is because of that error. It's because we're using the wrong geometry. So let's move on to the circle. This is where geometry actually begins. However, chronologically, it had to begin with a line. It did begin with a line. And it's only now that we're forced to approach the circle and sphere, which are closed lines. The straight line is an open line. Very artificial. The universe does not use it, but the universe knows about it. But it has no place in atomic physics. Linear algebra does not work in atomic physics. I should say subatomic physics. And it needs to be more specific than that, because linear algebra can actually do anything, with one incredible exception, which is brought out by the calculus. You may have wondered about the calculus being inaccessible to an ordinary human being of average intelligence. You cannot understand calculus unless you have a very, very strong aptitude for mathematics. Probably the 95th to 98th percentile. Well, that leaves out 95 out of 100 humans. That is unacceptable in science. Science is for everybody. Remember, we're not talking about industrial science, which is to build things. Then you do need those aptitudes, because you're not using basic mathematics or basic geometry to get basic understanding. But that's what science is actually for. You could say that it's also for technology. It's hard to argue with that, since it's the greatest gift of heaven to earth that we know of, except for one thing: wisdom. And that is the imperative of rational logic. A full-grown man realizes, and you have to realize this on your own, nobody can make you see this. But definitely someone like me, someone like myself, can tell you that you're a jackass, you're a retard, you're not a man yet, you're a sissy, and kick sand in your eyes, and the universe is on my side, not on yours. I don't do that, but if I really loved you, I would. But I don't really love you, because I don't even know you. And very important to say in the YouTube platform, I don't want anything from you. I do this for me. So let's turn to the circle now. What's different about the circle? It's a closed line. It doesn't go to any infinity. It chases its own tail like the Ouroboros worm or dragon or serpent or whatever it's called from superstitious history. Which, by the way, the serpent and the dragon, all those images you see about the dragon and the love of dinosaurs, lizards, there's a reason why that's in the Bible representing sin. So anybody who has a tattoo showing a dragon, you're not kidding anybody with that's the Chinese symbol of peace, okay? You better be very careful about how you use these symbols. So a circle is not a snake eating its own tail, which is actually a pretty devilish myth. A circle is the perfect line. It's a perfect line. And the straight line does not occur in nature. And that cannot be argued. I'm absolutely correct on that. There is no such thing as a straight line in nature. But there is such a thing as a circle. And there definitely is such a thing as a sphere, because the entire universe is spherical, and everything in it is spherical. From the nucleus of the atom, to a planet, to a star, to a galaxy, to the universe itself, is spherical, and all of those statements have been rigorously proved. So why are we using lines? Why are we using lines? Won't those break? Of course they will break. That's what's happened. But it only happened in the 20th century. And that's the answer to your question, how could this ridiculous situation have arisen? Well, it's led to the Big Bang Theory, so you know something's wrong just from that. But it's also led to the quantum paradox, and that's the killer. That's where it ends. Because we have to understand the building blocks of the universe, but we cannot with straight line geometry. It simply cannot be done. Here's how you know that. Draw your circle. Okay, how does that circle relate to the line? Well, when you see a circle, that doesn't go to infinity. It's not only closed, but it has no infinite aspect. That's the nature of a circle that immediately distinguishes it from a line. It's not anything to do with a straight line. It's the other kind of line. But that's actually the kind of line that the universe uses, and it does not use the straight line. Now, you may have some objections, and I'll tell you there are 2 footnotes that need to be treated very quickly, such as the linear distance to a star based on the flight of the photon. There's another one that's even more significant, or equally significant, and that's the bipolar jets that come out of an exploding supermassive black hole, which I discovered from this geometry. So all of this fits with cosmology and quantum mechanics to solve all these problems. And if you think I'm kidding, get lost. Because I'm doing this for me, not for you. I want you to get this, but I don't lose anything by you not getting it, so you can take a hike anytime. You're here to listen to me and learn, not to wonder if I'm telling you the truth. Because I've already given the proofs for every single thing I've said in 400 lectures over the past 2 years. So those are my credentials, and those are the only credentials I need to be right. There's another footnote, though. Science is based on consensuality, and I can't get out of that. Nor do I want to, but I have not yet submitted my LaTeX document to Archive. LaTeX and Archive. So now so we have a circle that represents the solar system, by the way, completely. It totally describes the equator of the Earth and the equator of the solar system, and the equator of any spherical system is a circle. So that's the basic line. It's closed. Of course, there's no such thing as a straight line to infinity. That's why we've had so much trouble with infinity. It's because it's linear infinity. There is an infinity, but it's just one. And that infinity is strange because it's dual. It's the center of the universe, which astronomy has not seemingly discovered the center of the universe, so that may sound daffy. Oh no, it's not. There is a center to the universe, to the same proportion, and for the very reason that it has an infinite edge, it has an infinite center. And those are in reciprocal relation. That's what we're getting to, and that's the basis of cosmic spheric space, physical spheric space, not mathematical. It's actual. It's a direct match on physics. In the 20th century, we discovered a whole list of spheres. And everything that we discovered was a sphere. Everything we discovered was a sphere. From the atom to the electron to the proton, all of those are spheres. And then we also discovered the galaxies, those are spheres. And we discovered higher orders of cosmic unit, all of which are spheres, except for the Webb. That's a polyhedron, and that goes to the edge of space. But it's infinite, spherically, in all directions. But the universe, because it's unbounded and spherical, has to be hyperspheric. And I'm the man who discovered that and proved it. And you're going to be the first one to learn it. And there is no possibility that this is untrue or incorrect in any way. This is such a match on every single paradox and unanswered question, from the galaxy to the quasar to the supermassive black hole to gravity waves, dark matter, dark energy, the Big Bang, the expanding universe, the quantum paradox, the collapse of the wave function, entanglement, superposition, inability to understand light, inability to understand angular momentum. All of these come from exactly the same problem. We're using linear mathematics for spherical reality. Isn't that incredible? That all of these men, such as Eric Weinstein, all of our physicists are absolutely blind to the most obvious fact, is that everything that they're having trouble with is spherical. And nobody has been able to make a correlation between the physical reality of spherical geometry and the incapacity of straight lines to measure it. But you, just sitting in your chair right now, can instantly see that there is no way in the whole universe for all of eternity that a straight line can measure a circle. The Greeks knew that. We think that with two straight lines we can do it. It doesn't make any difference how many straight lines you use. They're straight. That means that the metric will never be able to capture circularity or curvature at all. You're going to need the calculus. You're going to need a hell of a lot more than the calculus. After the calculus came complex numbers. And we've always known about sine, cosine. Those are calculus functions. Sine and cosine are not rational. Memorize that word, rational. I discovered that spherical geometry has a spherical number system that's rational and does not have infinity in it and does not have zero in it, solving the division by zero problem and solving the nightmare of mathematics. There's a reason you hate mathematics. And even if you're in mathematics, you know that you hate it. And I'll bet that Edward Frankel, if I could interview with him, I'd either have him in tears or he would have to dodge me somehow. We'd probably end up just laughing our heads off. But Edward Frankel definitely hates mathematics too. And if he doesn't think so, I'll make him think so. Because I have actual mathematics and he works with toys. So it's time to become big boys and grow up and do what the universe says. And here's what the universe says. There are three objects. The sphere is the universe and everything in it. Everything in it. Everything in the universe is a sphere. Everything is spherical. There is linearity here and there. And I can show you, depends on how far you're willing to go, but the straight line does show up, certainly from a human point of view. But there's one straight line that nobody can deny exists. When a supermassive black hole explodes, it sends out a bipolar jet at superluminous speed. This is well known. Well known. Millions of quasars have been cataloged. Not all of them show the bipolar jets. But you know how many do show the bipolar jets? A very large percentage of those millions, and those are only the ones that we've discovered. The quasar, by the way, in case you didn't know it, is the only luminous object in the universe except for the star. So there are only two luminous objects in the universe. One of them is the star, and the other one is the quasar. But the quasar is so gigantic, it's the exact same size as a supermassive black hole. That is, it's at exactly the same scale as a galactic nucleus. A galactic nucleus and a supermassive black hole and a quasar are all part of the same sequence. I discovered that from this geometry. So the way to get to this geometry, to understand it, there are at least a half a dozen valid ways to get to this geometry so that it clicks in your head and suddenly you're a Superman. This is evolution, by the way. As I've taught over and over and over again until it's become tiresome even to myself, there is no such thing as biological evolution. But there is such a thing as human evolution. That's called science. And now we're at the turning point. We're about to evolve into new creatures. It's only in the mind. We've been in the linear species until 2022, when I advanced the entire human race to the next level. The level of spherical, not linear. Linear is derivative. That can be proved. And that actually solves for the calculus. All of this has been proved. And if you don't believe it, you can find out. And so don't you dare tell me that it sounds improbable. What you should do is go back and listen to my lectures. Leave a comment. I will teach you personally if you're interested. So far, I have 0 bites. That's a pun. All right, we're a little bit past a half an hour. I hope you've enjoyed this so far. We haven't gotten to the sphere yet, and I haven't shown you the connection between the line, the circle, and the sphere, but I've given you a taste. The line is the derivative of the circle is the derivative of the sphere. The number 1 is the linear metric for linear space, and all it does is linear spatial separation. That's not adequate. We need space-time, but time is a different data type. Therefore, you need a 2-component number system that is not the complex numbers. That's what I discovered. The 2-component number system that creates spherical space instead of linear space. That is the most amazing breakthrough in the history of science, but I have a list of about 24 discoveries, each of which is the greatest discovery in the history of science. This is the most massive synthesis of understanding in the history of the human race, and I am the only man that can teach it. Stay tuned. This is Anagalactic. We'll be right back with you. This is the 5th day of January 2024. We're going into hyperspheric space with a series of 36 carefully prepared lectures of 10 minutes each. This is less than a week's work, but it's going to take more than a couple of months to get it all out. I intend to do so until I drop dead. I will not get a penny for it, and I will get no recognition unless you steal it or give me credit for what you know. But everything that I just said is true because it's been proved. So I have the approval of God, and that's why I don't fear death anymore. I made it. There's another side of a human. The emotional side also has to be taken care of. Knowing science won't get you to heaven, but it'll certainly open the door. But only you can decide on your relationship with love. Where does love come from? What do you owe love? Science has nothing to do with that. It's logical. Love is not logical. Good luck. This is Anagalactic. Don't forget to keep looking up.